Iran is heading toward an unprecedented internal explosion. The deadlock in the negotiations threatens to halt Iran's oil production activities. 20,000 sailors are stuck in a massive traffic jam of ships that is documented in the Strait of Hormuz. Trump convened a security meeting and discussed whether to renew the war or not. And soon, we will know which way the wind is blowing. So will only a renewal of the war and the strikes work against Iran? Let me know what you think about this in the comments. And meanwhile, here in Israel, the IDF is ready and on high alert for a final operation to destroy the Revolutionary Guards in Iran. What is certain is that Trump is not pleased with Iran's proposal to end this war, as the United States tightens the blockade on Iran. U.S. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent warned that gas stations in Iran will soon run out of gasoline supplies. Pumping is expected to collapse soon. The next stage, a gasoline shortage in Iran, according to what he said. And at the same time, the Ayatollah regime is in a tailspin. The Americans are still leaving a window open for a deal. But with whom? Who is going to sign this deal? And you can be sure that Iran did not see this coming. We will soon bring you the possible dramatic change in Israel's status because of the Hormuz crisis. I'm Yair Pinto. With me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel, and also the whole truth about what's happening in our neighborhood, the Middle East. And this is the opening of day 60 of the war Roaring Lion, or by its American name, Epic Fury. And the American president made it clear in the White House that the Iranian framework, which separates the opening of the straits from the nuclear talks, is not enough. Now Trump faces a question. Should he increase the economic pressure in order to squeeze concessions out of Tehran, or return to a full-scale military attack? Because of the naval blockade, Iran's warehouses are filling up with oil that cannot be exported. And that troubles at the top of the Iranian leadership, and it continues to keep everybody busy there. There is growing concern over the possibility of renewal of protests against the background of severe economic deterioration and reports of an approaching collapse in the labor market. According to the assessments presented in a special meeting, renewed protests is almost unavoidable, and the central question that remains open is when it will erupt. Look, what at first seems like unclear military moves by Israel against Iran is now beginning to become clear. It appears that Israel and the United States planned the stages of the war carefully, with the understanding that the fall of the regime would not happen in one day, but through gradual military and economic suffocation. Yesterday, the President of the United States convened a security discussion around Iran, just before the historic visit of Britain's King Charles. And at the same time, Putin, the President of Russia, met with the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who received a message from Mustafa Khamenei, and Putin promised, "We will continue the strategic partnership with Iran." But on the ground, the partnership is not saving Tehran. The United States is very pessimistic about the negotiations, but very optimistic about the blockade. And the numbers are already speaking. About 10 million barrels of oil have returned to Iran because of the tightening embargo and the blockade. Iran cannot simply stop oil production because shutting down the facilities could destroy them. And the result, the Islamic Republic is drowning in its own oil. The humiliation is enormous. An economy that depends almost entirely on oil exports is now forced to store surplus in ordinary sea containers, in old and abandoned tanks, and in storage areas in southern Iran. As if that were not enough, at the beginning of the war, Tehran had already lost more than 18.5 million gallons of stored fuel. And after Israeli strikes set major oil terminals in the capital on fire. Factories that produced parts of the maintaining the oil systems were also hit, and dozens of storage facilities were bombed. Now it becomes clear Israel may have to understood from the very beginning. We knew that the storage crisis would be Iran's choking point. And while Tehran searches for desperate solutions, it is even trying to send oil by train to China, an unusual, expensive, and unprofitable move in the energy world, where almost all oil exports prefer maritime transport. Facing this reality, Iran is still flexing its muscles. It is offering to open the Strait of Hormuz in exchange for lifting the American blockade and ending the war. But it is asking to postpone the nuclear issue. The mediators are broadcasting optimism. But in the White House, they understand that the real card is the blockade. Here the strategy changes. No longer the blockade is hurting oil revenues, but rather Iran has nowhere to put the oil. And this is already bringing the Iranian energy infrastructure closer to paralysis, even before any additional fire is used. Therefore, according to the American assessment, the blockade must not be stopped now. Early relief would bring oxygen back to the regime and waste a rare strategic lever. According to a report in the Wall Street Times, after the discussion convened by Trump, the understanding is growing that only a military operation will cause Iran to become flexible on the nuclear issue. American officials claim that the Iranian negotiating team is not even authorized by Mustafa Khamenei or senior Revolutionary Guards officials to agree to a real concession. And inside Iran, an internal battle is taking place over control of the country. The regime is trying to broadcast business as usual, but the split between the diplomatic front and the military level opposes the truth. Whoever speaks in Iran's name is not necessarily the one making the decisions. The Revolutionary Guards are strengthening their grip, rejecting compromises, and the regime is entering a dead end. Since World War II, there have been almost no absolute victories, but the achievements against Iran are already very significant. And this looks less like the end of the war and more like the stage where the pressure truly begins to crush the regime from within. And apparently, the crisis in the Strait is playing in Israel's favor. And right now, the question is not only a security question, but also an opening for a deep change in the way oil trade is preserved in the Middle East. And right now, what's on the table is a move from a system dependent on one bottleneck to a network of decentralized energy routes. Inside this move, Israel, which until now has watched from the sidelines, may become a connecting player because of its geographic location and infrastructures like EAPC. And was there a bribery case in the High Court of Justice in The Hague? Today, we will bring you the Qatari connection that's shaking The Hague. A new affidavit is igniting a storm around the suspended chief prosecutor in The Hague. According to reports revealed today, Qatar promised to take care of him if he worked to issue arrest warrants against Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and senior Israeli officials. All the details coming soon. I'm Yair Pinto, with me is Mati Shoshani, and we are boots on the ground, bringing you the whole truth about what's happening in Israel. And this is day 60 of the war against the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, which is the head of the crumbling axis of evil in the Middle East. And a second before we begin, I want to call on you to continue spreading the truth. Share our content with as many people as possible. Click the subscribe button. And most importantly, don't forget to look for me, Yair Pinto, and for Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms so you can get our first-hand perspective of what's happening in Israel during this war. The ceasefire with Iran may be in place, but no one here in Israel really believes that this is over. The missiles may have stopped for now, but the injuries, the trauma, and the need to stay ready, that hasn't gone anywhere. And through all of this, who was there from the very first moment? Magen David Adom. When the sirens went off, when the rockets hit, their teams were already on the ground, treating the wounded, evacuating the injured, saving lives again and again. And now, even as things quiet down, They don't stop. They're restocking supplies, repairing ambulances, retraining teams, getting ready for whatever comes next, because they know it will come. But to stay ready, they need support. So if you want to make a real difference and save lives in Israel, go to savelifeisrael.com. Again, that's savelifeisrael.com, and you can help Magen David stay prepared, strong, and fast so they can keep saving lives whatever happens next. About 20,000 sailors are now stranded at the sea near the Strait of Hormuz as the maritime gridlock in the Persian Gulf turns from economic crisis into a live security event. Maritime traffic has dropped sharply. Many ships are waiting without the ability to continue, and the world is beginning to understand that this war is no longer being fought only in the air with missiles or inside negotiation rooms. It is also being fought in this narrow passage where every tanker, every mine, every Revolutionary Guard boat, and every American decision can move global energy prices. And the question now is simple. Is Hormuz still an Iranian pressure card, or has the strait already become a trap that is closing in on Tehran itself? I'm Yair Pinto, and this is your Boots on the Ground report, closing day 60 of the Roaring Lion War, or by its American name, Epic Fury. And this day does not begin with one map. It begins with a chain. Hormuz pressures the Iran oil. Iranian oil pressures the Iranian economy. The economy pressures the streets of Tehran. The streets pressure the Revolutionary Guards. And the Revolutionary Guards, instead of compromising, are trying to push that pressure outward into Lebanon, into the Gaza Strip, into The Hague, into the United Nations, into Russia, and the global energy market at large. This is no longer only a campaign of fire and response. It is a campaign of strangulation, time, political decisions, and the question of who breaks first. In the Strait of Hormuz, the story almost looks slow, but it is moving very quickly. In normal times, this shipping lane carries about 1/5 of the world's oil and liquefied gas supply. Today, under the American blockade and the Iranian threat, ships are stuck. Part of the maritime traffic has collapsed, and shipping companies are beginning to relocate wherever it is even worth entering the arena. According to the maritime traffic data, in 1 week only, about 80 vessels passed through the Strait of Hormuz compared to a normal daily rate that could reach 130 or more before this war. That's not just a number. That's global movement being choked. And at the same time, dozens of ships have been attacked since the beginning of the conflict, and at least 10 sailors have been killed. Iran opened fire towards ships, seized 2 of them, and, according to the assessments, may have even placed naval mines in the area. The International Maritime Organization and other officials are calling for the creation of a safe corridor. But in practice, most ships are still not behaving as if the sea is open. Even when Tehran declares that the strait is open to vessels that are not hostile, ship owners, insurance companies, and captains understand very well the moment Iran decides who is hostile and who is not, freedom of navigation is no longer truly free. This is where the American strategy comes in. Washington is not settling for warnings. It is maintaining the blockade on Iran's ports, preventing tankers from leaving, inspecting vessels, and applying pressure on anyone trying to help the regime bypass the blockade. For Donald Trump, this is a weapon more precise than a fighter jet. It does not necessarily blow up a facility in one moment, but it prevents the regime from breathing over time. And every hour in which oil does not leave Iran is an hour in which the pressure inside the Iranian system grows. Iran's problem is not only that it has no one to sell to. Its problem is that it has nowhere to put the oil. Oil continues to flow from the ground even when tankers do not leave the ports. Land storage facilities are limited. Giant tankers, which are usually meant to transport the oil, are now becoming floating storage units. And when even those floating storage units fill up, Iran reaches the moment that every oil state feels: shutting down wells. Shutting down a well is not like turning off an air conditioner at home. An oil well operates through natural pressure inside the reservoir. When it is forcibly stopped, that pressure can change. Water can enter the oil layers, deposits can block pipes, and bringing the well back into operation may require technology, equipment, and materials that Iran struggles to obtain because of sanctions. That's why the naval blockade is not only a hit to the revenue, it could become physical damage to Iran's energy infrastructure, damage that will keep hurting even if an agreement is signed tomorrow morning. According to the latest assessments, Iran has only 12 to 22 days of available storage capacity left before it will be forced to cut production, possibly by around 1.5 million barrels per day. Loading oil onto the tankers has already been reduced by about 70%. Iran is even trying to move oil by train to China, a slow, expensive route that's not suited for the enormous quantities of a country like Iran that they need to move. It may sound like a creative solution, but in global energy terms, it is a sign of distress, not strength. And that stress does not remain at the port and moves into Tehran. Iran's Supreme National Security Council is already discussing fear of renewed protests. According to internal assessments, the Iranian economy will not be able to withstand another 6 to 8 weeks of this kind of naval blockade. Another figure in those assessments speaks of up to 2 million private sector workers who could lose their jobs by the end of the spring. When you add inflation, currency erosion, fuel shortages, damage to electricity, and difficulty paying salaries, you understand why the Iranian street frightens the regime no less than the American fleet does. That's exactly why the latest Iranian proposal is so important. Tehran is proposing to reopen the Strait of Hormuz, remove the American blockade, and end and delay the discussion of the nuclear issue to after a later stage. In other words, first give us the air, first let us export oil, first let us return the money to the treasury, and only afterwards we will start talking about the nuclear issue, the reason that we started this war in the first place. Okay? This is what they want to talk about. Washington understands the trap. President Donald Trump is convening a meeting in the Situation Room after his meeting with King Charles, and he made clear to his advisors that the Iranian framework is not sufficient. The White House emphasized that the president's red lines are very clear. Iran cannot separate Hormuz from the nuclear issue, because if the blockade is lifted now, the regime will receive oxygen without paying the real political price. That's exactly what Tehran is trying to achieve, a partial victory that looks like a ceasefire, but in practice buys it time. Secretary of State Marco Rubio presented the problem sharply. When Iran talks about opening the strait, it is not necessarily talking about full freedom of navigation. It wants to preserve control, coordination, permission for passage, and possibly also fees of ships. From the American point of view, that's not called opening Hormuz. That's called normalizing a situation in which the Revolutionary Guards decides who passes through the international shipping lane and how much money they need to pay. Hormuz is not Tehran's private road. It is an artery of the global economy. But inside the American administration, there is also a debate. Some advisors believe that the blockade should be allowed to work for several more months, because it could cause long-term damage to Iran's oil industry and force the regime to compromise. Others warn that the Revolutionary Guards are tightening their grip, that the Iranian position is hardening, and that Tehran's negotiating team may not even be authorized to make concessions on the nuclear issue. In other words, even if the diplomats are talking, it is not clear that the people who really decide want to deal. And that leads to the big question: who is America actually negotiating with? American officials are concerned that what appears to be deep division and power struggles inside the Ayatollah regime, the new Supreme Leader Mustafa Khamenei is barely seen, not sure if he's alive or not alive. President Pezeshkian is weak. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi He's speaking with mediators, with Pakistan, with Oman, and also with Russia. But behind the diplomatic window stands the Revolutionary Guards, and they are not necessarily prepared to approve what the political level can say outside. Abbas Araghchi met in Russia with President Vladimir Putin. Putin said that he had received a message from Mustafa Khamenei, wished him well, and promised that Moscow would continue to maintain a strategic relationship with Iran. Araghchi welcomed Russia's support for diplomacy and said that recent events had proven the depth of the partnership between the two countries. But this needs to be said quietly and clearly. Russia can provide diplomatic backing. It can provide a sense of strategic depth. It can help Iran feel that it is not alone, but it cannot open Hormuz by itself. It cannot refill the regime's treasury, and it cannot erase the public pressure inside Iran. At the same time, the United States is expanding the pressure to the aviation area as well. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent warned that any party providing services to sanctioned Iranian airliners could be exposed to American sanctions. That includes fuel, catering, landing fees, maintenance, and every small service that allows an aircraft to keep operating. It sounds bureaucratic, but this is exactly how a modern system is choked, not only through tanks and planes, but through every small pipe that keeps the state alive. Now, let's return to the military front that is closest to us here in Israel. This afternoon, the IDF struck more than 20 Hezbollah terror infrastructures in the Bekaa Valley and in southern Lebanon. In the Bekaa Valley, the IDF struck a site used for manufacturing weapons and storing weapon stockpiles, after Hezbollah reconstruction activity had been identified there. In southern Lebanon, the IDF struck weapons depots, military buildings, and launchers from which Hezbollah had fired rockets towards Israel. This is not just another pinpointed strike. This is a blow to Hezbollah's attempt to restore production, storage, and launch capabilities. Hezbollah is now threatening to return to the tactics of the 1980s and deploy suicide terrorists to prevent the enemy from establishing itself. That threat was not made in a vacuum. Hezbollah understands that the space in southern Lebanon is changing. The IDF is destroying infrastructure, hitting warehouses, preventing reconstruction, and making clear that even under the title of ceasefire, it will not allow the organization to return to the same villages, the same launchers, and the same homes where weapons were hidden before the war. In the north, the struggle is not only over fire, it is over control of the day after. Will southern Lebanon be an area of the Lebanese state or an area of an armed Iranian militia? Can the Lebanese government negotiate at all if Hezbollah announces in advance that it is not committed to its decisions? And that's the heart of the story. As long as Hezbollah holds independent weapons, Lebanon's sovereignty remains partial. A government can convene, envoys can be sent, agreements can be discussed and signed, but if an armed organization can torpedo everything with one rocket, then there is no truly a full state. Inside Gaza, the IDF continues to dismantle what Hamas built underground. Forces from the Northern Brigade and the Alam engineering units under the command of Division 252 have been operating in recent months in northern Gaza and in the Bet Hanun area, east of the Yellow Line. As part of the operation, about 14 kilometers of tunnels and underground routes were destroyed. Inside the tunnels, the forces found living quarters and many weapons, and around 70 terrorists who crossed the ceasefire lines and posed an immediate threat that were eliminated. That number, 14 kilometers, tells us something about the nature of the war. Hamas did not build such a tunnel to hide for one day. It built a system of life, movement, storage, and attack. Living quarters, weapons, movement between areas, the ability to reappear after the ground above was hit. That's why a ceasefire cannot be considered the end of the war in an entire military city remains beneath the surface. The IDF is not fighting only the terrorist who fires. It is fighting the system that allows the next terrorist to appear. And here again, the return to Iran. Because Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Houthis in Yemen, the militias in Iraq, and the pressure in Hormuz all are part of the same system. Sometimes it fires missiles, sometimes launches a drone, sometimes it seizes a ship, sometimes it sends a diplomat to Moscow, sometimes it tries to shift the blame onto Israel in an international court. That happens a lot. But the principle remains the same. Apply pressure from several directions so that no one can handle all the fronts at once. And before we continue, if you understand how important it is to bring the full picture from the ground, not just the headlines, but who is operating, how they're operating, where the threat is coming from, and what's really happening behind the scenes, help us keep spreading the truth. Like this report, share it with friends, family, and people who need to understand the Middle East without filters, and click the subscribe button so that you never miss another Boots on the Ground update. You can also look for Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani on our social media platforms, and check out our website, tbnisrael.com, to subscribe to our newsletter. And there's another front, a quieter one, but no less important. A new affidavit surrounding the International Criminal Court in The Hague has ignited a storm. After it was alleged that Qatar promised to take care of the suspended chief prosecutor, Karim Khan, if he moved to issue arrest warrants against Prime Minister of Benjamin Netanyahu, Prime Minister of Israel, and other senior Israeli officials, Khan and his lawyers strongly deny the allegations, and Qatar also rejects them. But the very appearance of the affidavit, together with the reports of a private intelligence operation intended to discredit the complaints against Khan, raised a difficult question about the way that money, intelligence, law, and propaganda meet around Israel. And this matters because the war against Israel is not being fought only on the battlefield. It's also being fought on the courtrooms, on social media networks, on campuses, in newspapers, and in international institutions. When a prosecutor in The Hague moves against Israeli leaders during wartime, and at the same time allegations emerge about foreign involvement, smear operations, and behind-the-scene promises, the public needs to understand that this is part of the campaign. There's not always an explosion. Sometimes there is an affidavit. Sometimes there is a campaign. Sometimes there is a headline trying to turn Israel from the attacked country into the accused country. In the United States itself, this war is already affecting the Jewish community. Students and surveys point to deep concerns over rising anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. A large majority of American Jews describe anti-Semitism as a serious problem, and many report changing their behavior because of fear. Some fear that Israel and its Jewish supporters will be blamed for dragging America into war. That's exactly the propaganda dream of Israel's enemies, not only to harm Israeli military, but to turn Jews around the world into people who feel suspected, defensive, and afraid. In Europe as well, the story is becoming complicated. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz attacked Trump and said that the Americans do not have a convincing strategy against Iran. He argued that the Iranians are stronger than expected, and that they are humiliating the United States through their ability to drag out the negotiations. Behind those statements is criticism of Washington, but also a sign of broader Western weakness. Some European countries did not want to be part of this war. Some restricted the use of bases and airspace. Meanwhile, Iran is testing who's the West, how is the West willing to stand against it, and who would rather lecture from the sidelines. But the Hormuz crisis itself may create a deep shift in Israel's regional status. For decades, the world relied on one choke point, the Strait of Hormuz. Now, as that route is shaken, Saudi Arabia is making greater use of the East-West pipeline to the Red Sea. The United Arab Emirates is relying on Fajirah infrastructure, and other players are examining land routes to the Mediterranean Ocean. Inside this new way of thinking, Israel could move from being an observer on the sidelines to becoming a connecting player. Not because it has oil, because we don't, but because of its geography, because of the Red Sea, because of the Mediterranean Sea, and because of the infrastructure, such as the Eilat-Ashkelon pipeline, which could become part of the regional layer of flexibility. The world will not abandon Hormuz tomorrow morning, but it is beginning to understand that it must not rely on Hormuz alone. In such a reality, whoever can offer an alternative route gains new importance. Israel can become a bridge between the Gulf and Europe, between energy and transit, between security and economy. This is not a magic solution. There are limitations of capacity, security, regulation, and regional cooperation, but the direction is clear. Iran did not want this to happen. Yet the crisis that it created may strengthen Israel's strategic position. This is how Day 60 comes to a close. In the north, Hezbollah is trying to rebuild itself and is threatening to bring back the old terror tactics of the 1980s. In Gaza, the IDF continues to dismantle Hamas's underground system. In Hormuz, thousands of sailors and ships are trapped inside a crisis that has become economic, security-related, and human. In Tehran, the regime is searching for air inside a blockade that is beginning to touch the oil wells themselves. In Washington, Trump understands that if he lifts the blockade before the nuclear issue is resolved, he may hand Iran the victory that it is looking for. This campaign is no longer only a question of ceasefire or war. It is a question of who breaks first when the sea is blocked, the economy is choked, and Israel's enemies are looking for a way to turn distress into victory. And if Iran is not willing to place the nuclear issue at the heart of their agreement, will the next stage be another round of talks or the military decision that everybody is trying to postpone? So keep spreading the truth. Follow us. Most importantly, do not forget to click the subscribe button so that you stay tuned to the truth in real time and never miss another Boots on the Ground report. Keep looking for us, Yair Pinto and Mati Shoshani, on our social media platforms, and also look for our website, tbnisrael.com, and subscribe to our newsletter. The best thing that you can do, as always, is to pray, because God is listening. He's listening to your prayers, whatever they are. If you want to pray about the situation in Israel, in the Middle East, in Iran, you can ask Him to intervene, to give wisdom to our leaders, to the negotiating teams, to give courage to the people of Iran, to protect the Israeli soldiers in Lebanon, to protect the children of this land physically and mentally, and to keep praying for the peace of Jerusalem. It's the best thing you can do.
Hello, this is Mati here in Jerusalem with TBN Israel.
This is Yair Pinto from TBN Israel here in Jerusalem. TBN Israel is keeping viewers informed with Israel-focused news, culture, and what God is doing in this land.
Support TBN Israel today online at tbn.org/Israel. Thank you.